we'll do a quick little look back on really what the last couple of years have been for Canoe, and then as I promised Tracy, that since it is the TV of Tomorrow show, that we do have some new news to share with all of you about the next stage and how we're addressing consumer behavior in the home. But like I said, we'll just take a little step back on where we've been, and then Jason will fill you in on the technology side of what we're going to tell you about. But for the last year, we've been extremely busy, focused very specifically on one product, being video on demand, dynamic ad insertion to the set-top box in the home. Matt Strauss was here earlier this morning talking about what a priority VOD has become for Comcast. We find that same thing with MVPDs, with other MVPDs. So right now, via the Canoe platform, we have over 30 million homes in which programmers can utilize that platform. So we're across all of Time Warner, all of Comcast, currently bringing up Bright House, and working with Cox to bring them on by the end of the year. So in terms of any consumer in a Comcast home and a Time Warner home, when they click on their icon on any of these channels, so they go right up to USA, say, I want to watch Suits tonight, click VOD. When an ad serves on that platform, that's Canoe technology behind there serving that ad to them. So on the footprint side, we've made a lot of progress we're really excited about. And obviously, when it comes to the programmers who have signed up, so we have over 120 programmers who are under contract. The 40 you see here are ones that are currently working with their advertisers and running ad campaigns through the system. So that disparity there, for instance, we have a corporate deal with all of Disney, which takes all their networks. But right now, we just have ABC and ABC Family up there. And because it takes us on the technology side some tweaking to get a network up and running, and then to train their sales force and all those sorts of things. So from the programmer side, we've had some great success over the last couple of years. So if we move on, good. We've got the MVPD side working. We've got the programmer side working. Now the question is, well, great. What about advertisers, right? Are folks taking advantage of it? This is some recent data from May. We've got an average of 230 campaigns running through the platform in any given week. If you compare that to last year, we were about 20 or 30. So, the numbers are just becoming pretty staggering. As I mentioned, 40 networks taking advantage of that. 85% of those campaigns running were external campaigns. But more importantly, what we're finding is more and more networks are treating this like they do on linear, using about 15 or 20% of the inventory for their tune-in messages. There was just a recent, Bruce at Rentrack put out some interesting numbers in a blog last week, talking about what a great opportunity this is for programmers. If anyone Googles that and takes a look at those findings, were pretty neat. We find the campaigns come from both linear agencies and digital agencies. Everyone's kind of out figuring out this space and how they can take advantage of it. And categories, we see it all over the fence, from automotive and studios and retail, health and beauty. I mean, you see it all up there. And what's really nice is that, let's say movie studios, for instance, we're seeing the studios take advantage of the platform for what the platform can do. So while we haven't actually implemented what these fine gentlemen are doing in terms of big data, really the system today schedules just like you can linear TV. We're really not into addressable targeting or on big data yet from the Canoe national perspective point of view. Jason will talk about how we're moving there, but for right now, it's really about getting scale, right? You can't really split up your audience till you have the scale in order to split up the audience. So we're really focused on that. But for movie studios, they are taking advantage of how you can schedule today, meaning where before in VOD, before dynamic ad insertion, all you could put in was a generic ad because that ad stayed in there for the month or 2 months that program was in there. Now with dynamic ad insertion, the studios, for instance, are doing what they do on TV or what they do on radio, and that is 2 weeks out saying, hey, coming in 2 weeks, opening next Thursday, and then the Sunday before saying coming this week, and then Wednesday night a new message saying, hey, opening tomorrow. Right, those sort of timely messages is now something you can do in VOD. Same thing in retail. Now the retail guys can come in on a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and they can say, hey, this weekend's special, something they couldn't previously do. So that's the kind of messages we're seeing happen. So back in 2013, for the full year, we did 2 billion insertions that came through the platform. Already, to this point in 2014, we already have 3 billion. So we've blown the doors off of what we were doing, inserting campaigns through. And our curve looks like this. On the bottom was our projected growth curve for this year. And that light blue represents what we're seeing come through the platform today. So it's just astounding. And all indications coming from this upfront season of when most advertising is sold right around this time of year for the full year starting in September, all indications that as VOD is being bought in this year's upfront from the TV and the digital folks. So we're quite excited about that. So.
And that's why we invited you to speak here, because you were telling me a little bit about this earlier in the year, and I thought this is significant growth out of the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, we're very excited. So with that success, there's obviously plenty of room to grow in terms of more networks, more footprint, more campaigns, more ads through the system, but simultaneously actually basically triggering off what's going on in this conference is the consumer doesn't stay still, right? Being able to deliver an ad to QAM VOD on the set-top box is good, and we've managed to make that come for real. But the consumer's always changing, and the technology has to change with it. So our NVPDs are changing with the consumer also. I mean, you look at the X1 box from this morning, and that's evident that Comcast isn't sitting still in terms of their needs.
But I mean, I know, Jason, you might address this, but what happened from last year to this? It's dynamic growth.
Sure.
What did the operators do differently that allowed this to happen over the last year 2 years, in your opinion? What was the key thing that made this change?
It really wasn't while it is a technology issue, it's more of a business issue. And it really started about 3 years ago when Disney cut a deal with Comcast that said, this is what the next 10 years is going to look like. Here's what our business is going to look like. Multi-platform, TV everywhere, some big data issues, things along that line. That was really the point where the business issues got worked out. So therefore, it allows a lot of us as technologists to be able to deliver on that. So really, that's all we've done is to focus on one, consumer viewing that happened, but two, that the business deals between the programmers and the MVPDs started to work out what these business arrangements looks like and allowed us to capitalize, and that's why you see that kind of growth.
You want to have Jason?
I only loaned.
I agree, but I think it's not ITV, right? There's a market now. I think that was always the problem with ITV is that how do you monetize that? That's the difference with VOD. People understand how to monetize VOD. They didn't understand really how to monetize the interactive ad popping up on the screen. How do you sell that? So.
Did you know this back when Canoe had to go into hibernation because the market wasn't ready for interactive TV advertising potentially back then, and you went back, you focused, you concentrated on this? You had an instinct, or did you get that? Did you know? Did Disney tell you? Did Comcast tell you that they knew what was going to happen? What was?
Yeah,
what was the mandate?
It literally was a bunch of smarter people than Jason and I asking a bunch of other smarter people. And yes, the board went around to programmers and went around to MVPDs and said, if you have to pick one, where's the main opportunity? And the answer came back of, well, we aren't monetizing dynamic ad insertion on VOD. Not monetizing VOD the way we should. So it really actually did come from the Disneys and the scripts and all of those people up there on those logos. They were the ones that were asked, and they said, here's what you should go do, and we went and did it, and lo and behold, they took advantage of it.
To what extent do you feel that you're behind the curve because interactive advertising is being delivered, out in the online world? To what extent, or when do you see, to some extent, you catching up with that world, or do you care whether or not these ads become interactive, have other types of functionality? Maybe it doesn't.
Well, we've
does it
got
matter?
one announcement now, so we'll make that one.
Oh, okay.
And then,
Okay, good.
and then we'll see. Main thing was, like we said, to solve for this problem. A programmer has the consumer watching VOD content, and I can't get an ad there, right? So we specifically solve for that. I think it does naturally lead to, okay, now that you have scale and now that you can deliver an ad like you do on linear, how do you start to apply some digital techniques or big data techniques or add-on interactivity, right? So now when you look at those issues in context of the base of VOD, sure, there's other places we can go. The main thing that where we're going, the next step that we're going, is that the same technology that we offer to enable the ad decision to happen in a set-top box, we've now made that enabled to happen to other IP devices in the home from that MVPD. So
Is that the news?
That's the news. So if you're right now, if you're watching Bravo and you're in your home on Comcast and we serve that ad into that program on the set-top box, it's no huge leap of faith, although I'll minimize all the work that Jason's done. No huge leap of faith to just say, okay, we've made that decision, that ad's getting served to the set-top box. Now, if the consumer's in their bedroom watching their tablet and watching that same VOD program, we can have that same ad pop up there also.
Is that one campaign measurable across all devices?
It is. It is. Jason, you want to maybe give a little more technical background?
Yeah, I mean, I think Chris is being kind because I was actually the one who said that to him a couple months ago when he said, how hard would this be to do? Canoe's really well plugged into Tony Warder and Mike LaJoy's organization, so we have weekly discussions with those guys, and so we sit down, discuss if Canoe gets into the what do we call it now? IP cable space. How would we do that? And so we had a couple discussions, got some consensus among Cox, Bright House as well, including Comcast and Time Warner, and said, we think we can do it, to have it look from a Canoe perspective the same as the way that it works for standard set-top box, the architecture today. So I, like a good engineer, turned around to Chris and said, oh, it'll work the same way. And his eyes lit up, and because he thought, as the good business guy, thought, oh, but it's done now, so just roll it out. Not as easy as that, because if you understand the nuances of the systems, right, as Canoe looks to work with the MRC and establish greater value in our data and the quality of that data, how we calculate, what is actually an impression in the set-top box space is easy from an MPEG-2 standpoint, because you can just assume first frame is, we count that as a view, and then we'll get a notification message that there's actually an impression made. Sorry. In the IP space, it's different, obviously. Anybody who understands this technology understands this. All that video is not a stream of video; it's chunks of video. And so, getting the 4 largest cable operators in the room to agree on how to do that calculation was one of the larger tasks. Everybody was, a great group of folks to work with, but like any good, software architect, lots of those guys have their opinions on how things should be accomplished, and so we worked through it all, and everybody agreed. But getting to the point where you've got now the 4 largest cable operators to agree on how to implement this across 30 million subscribers was, I think, a good win for Canoe behind the scenes. But back to Chris's point, it makes it look like, from a reporting standpoint and the reliability of the data, those calculations on how we calculate impressions is the same from a set-top box perspective and from an IP perspective. So it makes it pretty clean. So it is actually the same, but
Which
there's a
cable
lot of work
operators?
behind it.
Which cable operators?
Comcast, Time Warner, and then Cox and Bright House will come after, but everybody agreed to the methodology of how to do those calculations, so.
And now, Tracy, to your earlier point of, okay, we've got, QAM video on demand under control. Now, if we move, just take that definition of video on demand, not just within the set-top box, but now video on demand to other IP devices within the home, that's nice. And now you can start to say, okay, how do we bring in big data on that? What's the targeting look like? Or perhaps now you can do overlays a little easier in an IP environment
HTML5?
than you can in a set-top environment. And that was, back a couple years ago when Canoe decided to get out of the ITV business. One of the main drivers was that it was expensive in the set-top box architecture to be able to keep sustaining that. So now if we prove success in VOD, and now you start to expand that into IP video within the home, then perhaps down the line you can also start to add in some overlays into that now that it's in the IP environment.
To what extent is this still in the hands of the operators, ad sales teams? To what extent will this be, licensable out to agencies, broadcasters, outward? And then I guess the question after that would be, are we talking commerce? Interactive commerce?
So as far as where's the inventory show up, we are just the ad operations team for VOD for the national programmers. So NBC goes out, they sell a deal across linear, digital, VOD, and now when they get the VOD sell, they send that campaign instructions on to VOD. We run it through the system, give them the data back that it ran. So we serve the national programmer. Just like on the linear side, some of that inventory, back to those business deals between the programmer and the MVPD, some of those business deals say, hey, I'm Comcast Spotlight or I'm Time Warner Media Sales, I want some of that inventory for my local guy to sell. So they too have VOD inventory, a chunk of it that you can buy from those organizations. Canoe really doesn't act that we're owned by the MVPDs. We actually don't play in that arena. We actually concentrate on delivering VOD for the national programmers. Same thing as everything else, Tracy. If one of those national programmers said, hey, on the VOD screen, I now want to click for a T-commerce from that, as we service the programmers, it's our job to give them features and functionalities over VOD that they ask for.
That'll be harder, by the way. So.
Oh, yeah. To date, many of the asks have been around traditional TV asks. For instance, some things that we worked on and implemented in the past year was category separation. I don't want you to have the Ford ad next to the Chevy ad in an automatic fashion, right? Not sexy, not huge big data. But really important to our national advertisers. Something else that we're implementing over the summer, which is actually more of a digital type feature, is frequency capping. Only show me one ad, only show me this ad one time in this episode, or only show me this ad 3 times in the course of a week. So a very digital type concept that we're actually bringing over into the VOD platform. So we're solving more of those nuts and bolts type things right now, right? Building scale, making equal with sort of the base functionality of linear and the base functionality of digital. Mm-hmm. But now that we're having this sort of success, we'll see what what Jason ends up cooking up over the next couple years in terms of big data and overlays and T-commerce and items like that.
My last question is, when will this, the implementation to the devices be deployed, or is it deployed?
So for IP cable, we're talking about with Comcast and Time Warner in the August timeframe. So We'll start rolling out market trials then.
Great. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, thanks very much, gentlemen. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you.